Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the ABCs of Marketing Your Blog and Brand. My name is Christopher Penn, and if this is not the webinar you were looking for, you may want to leave now. Just kidding. If you're looking for the handout for today's webinar, it is located at the same URL you signed up for. It is right here. Lovely. And let's get started. I'd like to start today's talk with two challenges that I've been facing as a marketer on an ongoing basis. The first challenge is a pretty common problem. I've got an audience, right? I make content to capture the attention of that audience, to get them to engage, and ultimately to do business with me. The greatest limitation I face with that audience is that there's only so much so much business I can wring out of that existing audience. There's only so many qualified customers in there before there's nothing left. It would like wringing blood out of a stone kind of thing. Let me ask you this. As a marketer, does this particular chart look familiar to you? It might. If you're a sales or marketing executive, you've had this experience. If you're a veteran blogger, you've had this experience. In fact, you've seen a chart like this. Give it a second to catch up. You start a great product or service, and things take off, right? People are interested, life is good. After a certain point, though, growth starts to level off. Your momentum feels like it's fading. Hitting your numbers gets harder and harder. The solution to this, of course, is to get in front of newer audiences, but there's a complication with that, a not-so-minor snag. The greatest challenge we face as brands and as bloggers, as businesses in today's media environment, is getting anyone to pay the slightest bit of attention to us. If you look at the media landscape, it is more fragmented than ever. It is more diverse than ever. You are part of that. Yes, you, right there. Because you're part of the media too. The hours in the day that the consumer can give to us and to our content, it has not changed, right? Still 24 hours in the day. The options available to them are effectively infinite, more than they could ever consume. Compounding the situation is the nature of the digital era that we are in. Audiences are digital. Audiences are online. Audiences are mobile. Right? Data from Edison Research shows that more than 60% of the United States population has access to the internet by a smartphone. 80% of Americans 12 to 24 are carrying a smartphone. I was at an event recently with underprivileged kids from underprivileged areas, and wide spectrum of a very diverse audience, yet every single kid in the room except for one had either an Android phone or an iOS phone. So whatever someone is doing at any given time, including being up on stage, like, hi, there's always a more entertaining option available in your pocket. In fact, I bet some of you right now are probably playing Candy Crush. Go for the little disco ball thing. You, your brand, your blog, and your content, you're not competing against just another brand. You're not competing against your direct competitors in your industry. You are competing against Angry Birds, President Obama, the Pope, Disney, and YouTube, right? Every bit of it is on this phone. So how do we address these challenges? How do we transform the content that you're creating into meaningful results in an ever increasingly cluttered landscape? I'd submit that you got to get good at the ABCs of marketing. They are, you have to analyze your audience to figure out who they are. You have to build larger audiences to find new buyers, new customers. And then at the end of the day, you have to convert them, because without those conversions, it's all just window dressing. So if we follow the ABCs well, if we create great content and distribute it powerfully, we'll be able to bridge the gap between old and new audiences. We'll be able to bring in new people and help them engage with us. So let's look at the strategies of how we're going to do that. We'll start with the A in the ABCs, analyze. When it comes to acquiring new audiences, there's a fundamental strategy that an astonishing number of people ignore, which is fish where the fish are. So many businesses, so many bloggers, so many brands and organizations completely ignore this seemingly simple strategy. Why is this the case? Well, one reason why we don't fish where the fish are is that we don't know where the fish are. Organizationally, we lack an understanding of the tools needed to identify where our audiences are, who they are, and what would interest them. Everyone starts out as anonymous, a part of an undistinguished mass of people. Our challenge is to assess who these people are so that we can better serve their needs. If we fail to assess and analyze our audience, we risk creating content and conducting marketing campaigns to people who don't care about what we have to offer. In the worst case scenario, we will unfortunately alienate the people we wanted to attract, because what we thought people wanted was the opposite of what they actually wanted. So to prevent this, we need to develop an understanding of 3 different audiences. Now, there's a framework created by a company called Sequoia Capital that helps us understand these audiences, and it's broken down into 3 parts. It's somewhat ungainly named the Tam Sam Sol Model. I'm not sure why, but the first biggest bubble is TAM, Total Available Market. This is the largest possible portion of the population that could be in the broad market for your products or services. As an example, here at Shift Communications, our TAM is any corporation in business, right? We're a PR firm. Everybody needs PR. Sorry. The TAM for your blog is anybody who reads blogs, right? The TAM for your retail chain could be anyone who shops at retail chains or anyone who shops for the products and services you sell. The second bubble is called SAM, the Serviceable Available Market. This is the section of the market that could buy your specific products and services. In our example, Shift isn't a boutique PR firm. Right? Businesses who want a PR firm that specializes in, say, public policy or lobbying, they are in our TAM, but they're not in our SAM, because we don't offer services in those areas. Other companies who want a PR firm that delivers, $10 a month press releases, they're in our TAM, not in our SAM. Your blog might specifically be about sports or parenting. People who want to read photography blogs would be in your TAM, but not in your SAM. People who want to shop only at a certain retail brand might be in your TAM, but not in your SAM. These audiences change over time. If you're an ice cream shop, your TAM is anyone who eats food, but your SAM grows and shrinks depending on what time of year it is, right? Most of the time, people are probably not going to want your services in January in the Northern Hemisphere. The final bucket is called the Serviceable Obtainable Market. This is the portion of the market that you can realistically obtain through your sales and marketing efforts. This part of the market is your audience share. It's your leads generated, it is your customers, and this is dependent on your skills, on your resources, on what you're able to pull off. So a boutique PR firm has a very different looking SOM than Shift, and Shift has a very different looking one than, say, mega one like Edelman. Hi guys. In your worlds, your audience and readership for your blog is likely to be different even from the person who's sitting next to you, if there was someone sitting next to you. If there's not, sorry. The people who shop at one store may not necessarily shop at another, right? People who shop at Walmart are going to be different than people who shop at Neiman Marcus. People who buy macaroni and cheese from Kraft are going to be different from the people who eat caviar. So how does this apply to you and your audience? You have to know the specific people in each of these 3 buckets in order to create 2 kinds of content. You have to create content for the purposes of building audiences, getting people's attention, and then create different content for people who are in that SOM, that small that bubble in the middle, to help them convert. So all of this sounds great in theory. How do we boil this down to things you can do today? If we agree that identifying audience is important, we have to delve into this at a very tactical level. The first and best place to do this, to start understanding this, is by looking at the audience you already have. This is looking at your data. This is looking at where you've been, right? By looking at where we've been, we get a better understanding of where we might be going and whether that direction is correct or not. Now, you wouldn't necessarily want to drive a car by looking at the rearview mirror, but it's a good place to start. So let's look at 7 different tactical methods you can use to start assessing who your audience is. The first of the 7 is Twitter. If you have built any kind of following on Twitter, there's a tremendous amount of information already available to you. It's for free about the audience you already have. This is a snapshot of Twitter gives free analytics. If you go to ads.twitter.com and you go under third menu over Analytics, you will find a snapshot of your followers. And in that snapshot, you don't have to, by the way, you don't have to spend any money on advertising. What kind of information are you going to see? You're going to see, point to the little things here, you'll see who the interests are of your audience, what things they're interested in. In this case, this is marketing, entrepreneurship, leadership, SEO. This is the core interest of my audience. You'll see their locations, right? Where they're located, what cities, and you'll even figure out who else your audience follows. So I've got Hootsuite and TechCrunch and Guy Kawasaki and Chris Brogan. Hi, Chris. My audience in this case is very much about marketing. Marketing and business are what people want to hear about. So if I'm creating content, it should be about these topics, right? If we look towards the bottom here, I see a third of my audience is interested in comedy, movies, and television. Now, if I'm creating content to fit my audience's interests, I'm not a skilled comedian by any means. I apologize in advance if you thought that I was. But I might want to loop in popular culture. I might want to loop in some content from people like the late George Carlin or Jerry Seinfeld, or things that would appeal to this secondary set of my audience. So this is a useful starting point for my audiences. I see geographies. I see who else I might be collaborating with. A good example, as I mentioned earlier, Chris Brogan's up here. Every time I've done any kind of activity online, a webinar, an ebook, or something like that, with any of these people, it has always vastly outperformed just my own efforts. So when you look in your Twitter analytics, look to see who else is listed there. You may find some people you don't know, in which case you should probably introduce yourself to them, and then try to collaborate with them. See if there's an opportunity to do something together. Facebook gives you very similar information. In case you're not big on Twitter, you don't use Twitter a ton. Facebook offers this in a section of its site called Page Insights. And again, you're going to see your audience and how they're structured versus Facebook's general audience. In this case, on the version of my screen here, we'll see my audience is unevenly weighted towards men between the ages of 35 and 44 compared to the average on Facebook. We also see location, city, languages, all that stuff. This is useful for things like advertising. A third place you might want to look, even if you're not using social networks, would be in your Google Analytics. Google provides this data from its ad network. Every single website you go to online shares data with Google if they've got Google Analytics or AdWords installed, and it will tell you all about who is in your audience. So in this case, I have technophiles and movie lovers and shutterbugs in my general interests. This is stuff that I want to create content around. If I can incorporate any of these things, any of these topics, cooking enthusiasts, political junkies, there's opportunities for me to create content here. So look in your Google Analytics on your website and see if your audience has similar interests. On the right-hand side of the screen is something called in-market segment. The in-market segment is purchase intent. If your blog is about, say, automobiles, you'd better have automotive as a topic that people are in the market for, or you know your audience is kind of off target. You don't have the right audience. What you're looking here for are not just piles of data. We've got plenty of data, but trends, patterns, and frequencies. If your audience on Twitter and Facebook and in Google Analytics all looks the same, all from similar parts of the country, all similar interests and demographics, then you can start to tailor your content to those audiences. Here's an example. We were doing some client work recently, and we noticed a disproportionate number of users for this one client had their browser set to a language setting called ESUS, which is a Spanish language setting for North America. In their geographic data, we saw 3 cities that were overrepresented: Los Angeles, El Paso, and Miami. What testable hypothesis might we infer from this data? Well, logically, a significant portion of their audience might be of a Hispanic ethnicity, which could in turn give us different ideas about how to approach the content we need to create and the stuff that they might want to blog about, even the languages they might want to blog about. Speaking of language, as part of persona development, we want to understand how to speak to our audiences, not only in the language that they are speaking, but in the words that they're using. If you haven't tried with them yet, there are tools called word cloud generators. There's one at tagxedo.com, which is TAGXEDO. There's wordle.net, which is another one. Word clouds they're not really good analytics tools. Like, they won't tell you with measurable accuracy what words people are using, but they can give you ideas about general words and phrases and patterns in language. So here's an example of something you can try. Go and copy and paste all of the replies that people have sent to you on, say, Twitter. and copy and paste it into a text file, and then go to any of these word cloud generators and paste it in there. This is an example of word cloud. Now, then go and take your updates, your social media updates, your Twitter posts, your Facebook posts, do the same thing. If the word clouds don't look substantially the same, you may not be talking to the audience in the language that they are hear. Right? If you were talking all about SEO and your content, your audience is saying, well, we actually want to hear about email marketing, then you've got a mismatch. You need to do something about that. You need to fix that up. Look for that overlap. What if you have an okay audience, but you want to expand your horizons? If you want an even bigger look at the data that Google is offering to you about your industry, your vertical, take a peek into their new AdWords tools for display advertising. You don't have to spend any money to get access to these tools. They're free even if you just want to poke around. Now, the way I use this to understand the audiences that I'm working with in order to develop personas is to look at the category leader's website and see what the demographics of that website are. Here, taking a look on about websites that are popular about blogging. See Blogosphere News, blogotoday.com, things like that. And I can see the gender, the devices, the age breakouts, and I can see if I've missed a big chunk of my audience, right? So if I have, say, a small amount of people, the age is 35 to 44, but the category leader has a huge chunk of audience in that section, I know that I'm missing the boat. I'm not getting the audience that I could be. You can also then take this data and go run ad campaigns on it. Another great tool for understanding your audience is a tool that Google calls Webmaster Tools. If you're not signed up for this already, just go do it. It's google.com/webmasters. It's totally free, as with everything here. And the thing about Webmaster Tools that is so powerful is that you don't need a crystal ball to see where your audiences are interested in. Your audiences will tell you what they're interested in based on what they're searching for. Inside Webmaster Tools, on the left-hand side, I think it's second or third menu down, there is a section called Search Queries. You will see exactly the words and phrases that people are using to search for you and find your website, and how large the audience is for any of those searches. Obviously, you want your brand and your blog name to be in there because that would just make good sense. But you'll also find a huge number of topics that you get 100% of a very small number of inquiries. So if you were to sort on this display here, if you were to sort click-through rate to 100%, you'd see a whole bunch of smaller searches there that you're getting great traffic for, right? You're getting 100% of the click-throughs, even if it's not a large number of people. So then you want to create more content about those topics. If you're still not confident about your audience, or if you want to understand what people want, the gold standard for understanding why people make the choices they do is surveying. Right? Flat out ask them. There are a number of excellent tools for doing surveying. There's Google has some. Top shelf research firms like Edison Research can assist you in doing this. And these tools, these surveying tools, will tell us why. Right? Everything we've talked about so far tells you what happened. What did somebody search for? What do they look like when they're signed up for Facebook? But we have no understanding yet of why people made the choices they did. Surveying helps to fill in that gap and provide more insight into your audience's motivations. One of the most powerful surveying methodologies, it's an easy one for you to try, is to ask people 3 simple questions. Have you heard of your blog? Assuming that you have something to sell, what's your intent to make a purchase from that blog or that brand in the next 30 days? And finally, 3rd question, how likely are you to recommend this blog or brand to a friend? These 3 questions and their respective answers can give you ongoing insights into how your audience perceives you and the work you're doing. As you conduct surveys, make sure to pay attention to the different segments of your audience to see if the answers vary. All this adds up to doing the detective work needed to understand your audience's individual segments, to get a sense of who they are, to what motivates them, what content they expect you to produce on your blog or as a brand. Done properly and well, you'll know exactly who you need to address with your content in order to take the next 2 steps in our process, building and converting audiences. So we know who the audience is and what kind of content they're interested in. How do we go about creating that kind of content? More importantly, how do we create the kind of content that will ultimately help us achieve our goal of reaching new audiences? The answer is to elicit 3 different kinds of behavior. These behaviors are rooted in social media, but they are universal across all forms of media. They are voting behaviors, engagement behaviors, and sharing behaviors. We want people to do these things because they explicitly endorse the things we're doing, right? So every time somebody hits the like button, they are giving you a small endorsement. It's a tiny little one because even your cat could hit the like button by accident. We want people to comment. We want people to engage with us, with the content that we've worked so hard to produce. We want them to reply, perhaps click through, fill out a form. Thank you for those of you who did today. And make tangible commitments to us. And finally, we want people to share our stuff. Right? We want them to forward the email, to retweet social stats, to tell a friend at the water cooler or the neighborhood party. We want people talking about us because that's the most trusted way people find out about new things. Sure, things like advertising and mass media are great, but when a friend, an actual friend, not a social media friend, real friends, tell you about something, you tend to pay attention. So how do we do this? What plan can we use to create these three behaviors? The answer is what we call here at Shift the Earned Media Hub strategy. Now, this is based on the premise that making content that's truly great is fairly difficult. A lot of the time, we make great content and hope that the angels of search bestow their grace upon us, or that the social media fairies magically appear and lift our content to great heights. That doesn't work all that well. We work hard on our content, but the deep irony is that we don't work hard on the distribution of our content and trying to extend its life, kind of throw it out there and hope it works. The Earned Media Hub strategy is one way to ensure that our content gets the attention and the lifespan it deserves. How does it work? The Earned Media Hub strategy begins with research. We research to determine what content is going to be most appealing to people, most likely to be shared, most likely to be talked about, the core behaviors. We reviewed a lot of research tactics in the previous part of the presentation. The second step is messaging. Messaging is more than just coming up with clever taglines and Twitter status updates. Messaging is about aligning the content you're going to create with the rules and guidelines of your brand, delicately balancing provocative with appropriate. What do you stand for? What content won't you create? There are any number of very prominent brands that have done ill-advised promotional ties. There's one clothing manufacturer that tried to tie its clothing line to things like civil wars. These are people that the messaging and the brand did not align with their content strategy. The third step is to get creative, and this is more than just design, though design is a huge part of it, an essential part of the process. Creative also refers to coming up with new perspectives and ways of talking about a particular subject or topic. Something sets you apart from the crowd. In any given news topic, there's going to be things that people are just parroting mindlessly and retweeting and resharing without even reading the article. The reality is, if you are doing that, then you're not going to get those core social behaviors, because not only do people not like reruns, people really don't like reruns of reruns. Now, that doesn't mean you always have to be creating something brand new, but it does mean you need to adapt and transform a topic into something that's unique to you. Growing up, my parents had a absolutely legendary collection of Tupperware and Corningware containers. They used to store leftovers, something that my brother and I were never terribly thrilled with. Now, later in life, I learned that it's not just a matter of throwing it in the microwave. You can actually learn to add a couple of new ingredients to turn leftovers into something new. It turns out that like adding eggs, garlic, or cheese to something will fix just about any leftover. It's like a whole new meal. The same is true of your ability to get creative with things other people have already talked about. What added flavor or spice can you contribute that will make something old into something new? Once you understand the messaging and the creative angle, you have to create the content. That's where most marketers stop. They kind of publish the content and wait for the world to find it or make a token effort to share it on their social networks and hope that's good enough. The Earned Media Hub strategy says, yeah, that's good. You created all this content, right? But do a little extra work to promote it on earned, owned, and paid channels. The final step is to get your audience to take tangible actions, sort of move down the funnel. So all this sounds great in theory. How do we make it happen? How do we actually make this work? First, do your actual research. Do your homework. Figure out what's being talked about and what's not being talked about. What information do you have that other people don't? Define your messaging is the second one. At Shift, as an example, we have 7 core values: creative, connected, dedicated, honorable, smart, positive, and ballsy. We keep these on index cards, mouse pads, wall decorations, T-shirts, drink trays. I'm trying to think of where else we've got these printed. I think we've printed them just about everywhere except on people's retinas. The point is, these guidelines tell us what content we can't create. We have a list of these things, and every single time we go to publish content, we ask ourselves mentally, is what we're about to publish supporting these core values, or is it going to violate those core values? Is it going to break them? If it violates them, if it doesn't, if something goes wrong, if they don't support the core values, we don't publish it. We just say, well, let's go resharpen our pencils and figure it out. After you've done that, it's time to create the content. And there is a simple rule, not an easy rule, but a simple rule for figuring out what good content is. That simple rule is what I call the 3L rule. As you are creating your content, if it didn't make you laugh when you were creating it, chances are no one else is going to find it funny either. If you didn't learn something or you don't love it, you've got bad content. Remember, you're the subject matter expert on your blog, right? You know what you're talking about. So when you're writing your next blog post, if you're learning something as you're writing it, then your audience is gonna learn something from you too. If you're not talking to your significant other and annoying your spouse and your kids about the piece of content you just wrote, then you know your heart's really not in it. One of the things I love to do during presentations is ask people, what of the last newsletter that you wrote, how many people really loved it? You know, raise your hands if you were absolutely just talking about it in your sleep. No one ever raises their hands. But when you create something you're really proud to talk about, you share it. You beat the heck out of it. So use that rule. Use this 3L rule. If you don't laugh, learn something, or love it, you got bad content. Start over. Do something different. Here's an example. This is one that we came up with recently called the Facebook Page Cost Calculator. Right? We saw that Facebook had retuned its newsfeed algorithms to try and promote more ads. Well, they say improve quality, but it really means to sell more ads. And we invested the time and the research to figure out exactly what had changed. And it turns out that in order to even reach the same amount of audience that you used to be able to get to, Facebook said, we expect you to pay about a penny per 2 likes. We looked at a whole bunch of clients and a whole bunch of pages we control and saw that number. So that's the first L. We learned something. The next thing we did was to create an online calculator, which you see here. And if you want to try it out, just look for a Facebook Page Cost Calculator on the Shift website. Wrote the code, published it, and absolutely loved it. I was thrilled with it. Annoyed my children with it. They didn't care, but I did. So that's L number 2. So we learned something and we loved it. Being told that you're going to pay more to Facebook doesn't really make you laugh. So we got 2 out of 3. That's not bad. Finally, we need to take this content we've created and we need to get it out there. So we took our Facebook Page Cost Calculator and we started running it up to our owned media channels. These are the places you own. This is your blog. But it's also your social media channels that you control, right? It's also your email newsletter. It is any place where you are allowed to publish content without restriction. That's owned media. I know there's some discussion about what is owned versus what's called rented media, but the reality is if you can publish to it, it's owned media. Again, that's where marketers tend to stop. They throw it out there, they hope it works. Oops. The bad news is, as a strategy, build it and they will come hasn't worked since 2001 online. So what you need to do now is amp it up with additional distribution strategies. That takes us to the second of the media bubbles, right? Earned media. This is classically what used to be called PR or public relations, but it's so much more than just traditional PR these days. We took our Facebook calculator and we reached out to our friendlies. It's a PR term which means journalists, publishers, influencers who generally like what we have to offer and will generally share it if it's good enough. The idea with your friendlies is to get some immediate results and influencer coverage to start creating that perception, that groundswell of support for the blog post that you just wrote or the tool or the white paper you just published. As an aside, if for people who are online, look at the hashtag for this webinar, ABC Shift, right? Do some networking of your own right now. Just pull up Twitter in a little side window and see who else you can meet. Once you have initial public validation of your stuff, it's time to take it to the next level. This is where you reach out to other people who aren't necessarily friendly to you, but will publish something if it's legitimately interesting, if it's legitimately compelling. Having that initial earned media burst from all your friendlies really helps with that because it gets you to, you can point to it and say, well, so-and-so already covered this, perhaps you shouldn't miss the boat. In our campaign for this Facebook page cost calculator, we approached as many relevant publications as we could and said, hey, would you consider sharing this? Because it hit a good chunk of the 3L rule, and we had that initial support. We got a fair amount of coverage out of it. We got companies like Adonis, Wired, Yahoo, all covered it. Now, the last piece of the puzzle is paid media. Digital advertising in this case. There are 3 different approaches you can take when it comes to digital advertising and promoting your content, promoting your blog. All 3 have their merits. One is called straight up digital advertising, the second is called retargeting, and the third is called syndication. Straight digital ads sound exactly what they are. That's using any of the major advertising platforms like Google AdWords, Facebook ads, Twitter ads, LinkedIn ads, coming soon, Pinterest ads. By the way, the beta is open if you want to sign up for it. You get the idea. You simply take ads out on your content. One of the reasons that paid media comes last in the order of this earned, owned, and paid is that it is expensive, right? You have to actually dump real cash into somebody else's machine. And you want to know that the content is good before you go spend a lot of money on it. So when you publish it, if you're not getting any traction, if you're not getting anyone to talk about it, your friendlies aren't talking about it, your influencers aren't talking about it, don't spend money on it because you already have indicators that say content's not great. That said, if you do see those results, you'll want to go out and take out ads on it. This is an example of one where we used ads to target reporters to say, hey, we've got a piece of content, and we only wanted to show it to those reporters. The second kind of advertising is called retargeting. Using Google AdWords or Facebook or Twitter or there's a bunch of other ones. We have a partnership with AdRoll is a good example. You can take out advertising against an existing audience, a list of people who you are already keeping track of. Retargeting is one of the most effective ways, and it's one of the least costly forms of digital advertising because you're promoting your content to a list of people who already know you, who already have a relationship with you. The focus of retargeting, when you do a retargeting campaign, though, has to be telling people, please share this, right? You want people to distribute your content because you already have them in your database. You're not growing a new audience unless they go out and they share it as widely as possible. So consider taking it out in the ad text saying, please share this article about X. Please share this Facebook calculator. The third kind of advertising is called syndication or amplification. This is when you take out ads against a piece of content that somebody else published about you. Remember, owned media is where you say you're awesome. Paid media is kind of where you say, hey, we paid to say we're awesome. But earned media is where somebody else is saying, hey, you're awesome. You want to take out ads against those articles. So let's say that in this case, the Facebook page calculator was tried out by somebody, and they wrote such a glowing review of it that it was like the heavens opened up, angels came out, and stuff, and it was a wonderful review. Rather than buy ads on our owned media content, we would actually want to take out ads on that review, on that blog post, that guest blog post, that write-up. It's much more credible that way. People will see that and go, I got to try that out. So-and-so did an amazing write-up of it. So that's how you actually do the earned media strategy. I hope it's apparent to you that it's not rocket science, it's just a lot of hard work to do it. But does it work? When it comes to measuring our content, how do we know that this strategy works for us? How do we know that these things, these ideas actually deliver results? The first place we look is our web analytics. Let's look at a couple of key indicators that tell us that our Earned Media Hub strategy is working as well as it should be. Pretty much everybody is or could be using Google Analytics. So you'll want to look in Google Analytics at 3 different numbers. The first number you'll want to look at are new visitors to your website, right? Because new visitors tell us overall how well are we doing at attracting new audiences, new people. If our new visitors number is not growing, we know we've got a problem, right? We've got a blog, we're promoting it, and yet that blue line is not ticking upwards. The second key metric that we want to look at is called returning visitors. This number tells us about the amount of people who have come back to us, come back to our blog. If our content is good, people will come back over and over again. We want returning visitors to be constantly going up over time. And if it's not growing, it means our content's not engaging. It's probably violating the 3L rule. It's probably violating one or more messaging rules. If we're growing both new and returning visitors, we know we have a content strategy that is being delivered to the right audience. The third place you want to look is if you're using social media, right, to promote your content on earned, owned, and paid channels. You should see this in social media referral traffic. Google Analytics and many other web analytics tools have this information built in. It's just a matter of keeping an eye on it. You'll want to see your traffic sources sending you new audience members. So you want to see search numbers go up as your content gets promoted. You want to see your direct traffic go up, because direct traffic typically comes from these lovely devices. You'll want to see social, you want to see blog readership from sites like FeedBurner and Feedly grow up, all these different things. The last thing you will want to take a look at is audience behavior on your website. Do you see people just visiting one page over and over again, or like the most recent blog post, or do you see people exploring around, visiting more of the site, checking out who you are and what you have to offer as a blog or as a brand? You want to see a lot of diversity here. You want to see fewer of those red lines and more depth. If your content isn't great and isn't engaging, chances are people will go to just one page and go away. That means that you probably need to do some design work on your website, but also keep publishing great content, because it will encourage people to look around more and more. So this set of metrics gives you some insight about what's working and what's not in the content you're creating for the purposes of building and growing new audiences. If you do everything we've talked about up to this point, you should start to see aggressive growth in your new audiences and loyalty from those audiences. That's a great place to be. Being popular as a brand and as a blogger is important. That said, there comes a point where usually after you spend some money on your marketing infrastructure, you used to say, well, okay, is this really worth it? What tangible results am I actually getting? For that, we need to change our perspective on content and switch gears to look at content that converts. This is the C. What kind of strategy do you need for this? There is no better and simpler roadmap for understanding content that converts than having a logical sales or marketing funnel to follow. The funnel, hands down, is a little bit dated when it comes to how people actually interact with your brand. We know that for sure, but it's a logical framework, an excellent logical framework for structuring your content and your marketing operations. Briefly and logically, a funnel occurs in 3 stages, pretty much always. The first stage is to identify and grow your audience, and you should feel like you have a decent amount of strategies and tactics for that. The next stage is getting people from the audience you've built to raise their hands and say, yes, I'm interested in learning more about you. I might want to explore doing business with you in some fashion. At the very least, I want to hear from you more. These folks are typically what we would call leads in complex selling processes. Now, lead generation applies to everybody who's listening to this webinar today, no matter what your business is, because subscribers to your blog are leads, right? People who sign up for your email list are leads. People who download a coupon or register for an account, like all of you did today, thank you, are leads. People who walk into your store are leads. People who pick up a box of mac and cheese at the supermarket and put it in their shopping cart are leads. A fellow business executive said to me recently, if you are still in business, you have a lead generation problem. There really is no such thing as too many leads, at least in abstract. The third and final stage of any sales funnel is the sale. And the sale in this case means any kind of tangible, meaningful commitment that somebody makes to you. If you're a blogger, a sale might mean a click-through on an affiliate program that generates some revenue for you. If you're a brand, a sale is probably going to be actual revenue, money in the bank. If you're a nonprofit, a sale could mean a donation, but it could also mean a volunteer. Even political candidates technically make sales. They're called votes, although they do take a lot of bribes too, now that I think about it. Once you've mapped out what each stage of your funnel means to you, all that's left for you to do is figure out how to get people to take actions, to go move them from one stage to the next in the funnel. Moving from place to place requires people to take that action, but only the most naive marketer believes people will do so unprompted. And that brings us to the second vital strategy, which is we have to understand the difference between audience-centric content and sender-centric content. As communicators, we tend to be very sender-centric. This means we love to talk about us. Read my blog, read my newsletter, buy my stuff. If you've ever gotten a really like tone-deaf sales pitch from somebody, you know what sender-centric messaging feels like, right? You can tell they just want your money. Audience-centric content is all about answering a single question. What's in it for me? From the perspective of your audience, instead from your perspective. What's the benefit that they're going to receive? How will filling out yet another web form on a website or subscribe to a newsletter, how will it be to their benefit, to your audience's benefit? I had a sales professional I worked with at a recent job who had a wonderful saying, the radio station in your audience's heads is always tuned to WIFM. What's in it for me? Every action people take relies on them believing that moving to that next stage in the sales funnel is to their benefit. If you do not clearly and obviously just hand them, here's what's in it for you, people will not take action. One of the basic truths of the information age that we live in today is that people are too distracted to draw the conclusion for themselves. You have to hand them the conclusion neatly packaged so that they don't have to think. So, speaking of doing what people want, getting people to do what you want them to do, let's look at how to bring this to life. Conceptually, very simple to understand. A lot of bloggers tend to still put sender-centric content out there. So this is an example of a landing page that we set up for a recent ebook. All of the copy is written from an audience-centric focus. Here's what you will get if you download this ebook. Here's what's in it for you. Here's how you will benefit from it. There's a simple structure at work here linguistically. It's problem, agitation, solution. You present the problem that the audience is having. You create a little agitation by explaining the impact that this problem is going to have, and then you set the stage for them to take action by providing a solution. In this example, we posed a problem that we think the audience has. PR doesn't seem to work so well anymore. We stated the impact on the audience, which is you have a harder time getting attention for your brand or your blog, and we suggested a general solution, social media. Finally, we made a clear call to action. Download the ebook and learn how to solve your PR problem. What's in it for me is very, very clearly defined. There's no ambiguity. Nobody has to guess what the ebook is about. What's in it for me gets even more clear when you look at the bottom half of the landing page. We offer people a legitimate choice. If you want the book for free, fill out the form. If you don't want to have a salesperson call you and email you, because that's how these things work, you can purchase the book from Amazon.com for $10 and not submit any personal information at all. Now the reader, the audience member, understands there's an economic value to the book, so the offer of a free download becomes even sharper. They know what's in it for them in two different ways, not just the knowledge, but it's also the opportunity to save $10. Even more interestingly, as kind of a funny side note, the number of submissions of false information goes down when you do this because you present a real economic value. And for the majority of people out there, they're honest folks, so filling in false information at this point feels like stealing, which is kind of a nice little trick. Here's another tactical implementation of convincing people to raise their hands. Make it easy. Make it really, really, really easy. This is an example of something here called a Twitter card. You publish these lead generation cards on Twitter. If you go to ads.twitter.com, you'll see it in the second menu over. It's called Creatives. That you link up in a Twitter status post. This is also an example of being able to finally tune and craft your message because you've got to get problem, agitation, and solution into 140 characters and a very small graphic. If you can do that well, a Twitter card enables you to get people to give you their personal information in like 1 or 2 taps or clicks. When they see this on their mobile device, all they have to do instead of typing and using a little tiny keyboard here and typing is they just have to tap subscribe and they're on the list. If you want to build out a newsletter, get people to sign up for a deal, Twitter cards are an example of how to do this efficiently and effectively. It's super impactful, especially if a significant portion of your audience is mobile, because you're not just offering the explicit what's in it for me of the problem you solve. There's yet another layer of what's in it for me because you're not making people type. What's in it for me can apply post-engagement too. For example, present what's in it for me after you've shown your value using a website pop-up. Now, not a ton of people love website pop-ups. They're a pain, but usually because they're implemented wrong. They're implemented as a sender-centric tool. You go to a website and wham, right in the face there's a huge website pop-up. You ask for value before you deliver value. The way to use them properly is to have them pop up at the end of your blog posts. pop them up after you've given the value first. This example, it shows up as just as you hit the bottom of the post, the pop-up shows up, and then people feel like they've gotten value, they can give value in exchange. So you give your value first. There's a different twist on what's in it for me, something called a content locker. This is a tool that you can install on your blog in which someone needs to register in order to get at the goods. For example, suppose you had a blog post or a piece of content with a retail giveaway or a coupon. You could have the offer details in the blog post up front so people know what's in it for them. But when you get to the coupon part, it says, please give us your information. So what's in it for me provided there. Pretty straightforward. The last example of eliciting behavior you want is through direct response advertising. In contrast to the ads that we talked about in the build section of our discussion, direct response ads try to convey the problem and call to action within the ad itself. Now, you've got to get really good at writing very, very tight copy, but they are especially powerful when you combine them with retargeting, showing ads to people who have already heard of you or checked you out and just need a final few nudges to get them to raise their hands. So, the funnel is a wonderful way to strategize about conversion. And one of the wonderful things about it is how easy it is to come up with a plan for measuring it. In each stage of the funnel, there are broad key performance indicators that explain how you're doing. We've talked about audience growth and engagement. When it comes to conversion, what should we be looking at? The answer depends on whether you're talking about lead generation, in which case you want to look at your marketing automation system, or talking about bottom line results, in which case you want to look at your sales CRM. One tool that everyone has access to is Google Analytics. It may seem like a strange way to measure leads, but it's surprisingly good at tracking what people do on your website. And there are certain actions that every audience takes. If you have a website, if you have a blog, that have either an implied or explicit economic value to them. Using Google Analytics, if you track how many people take those actions, you have a good sense for just how much revenue they are likely to generate. Let's look at a simple example of how this works. Let's say you're selling something on your site. For simplicity's sake, we'll say it's worth $100, one sale. That's the bottom of your funnel. If you can track the thank you page after a purchase, then you know that every time the page loads, you made $100. So what steps occur in the process before that sale? If people sign up for an email list and 10% of those people go on to buy something, then every time somebody signs up for your email list, you know, simple math, an email list subscriber is worth $10. Logically, then you can even go up the funnel even further and find out what those revenue impacts are. There's a blog post that explains this in crystal clarity. I just did it for Jeannie Dietrich over at her blog Spin Sucks. So if you want to check that out, over at spinsucks.com. That's a great place to look. Finally, you'll want to look into your sales CRM. Did you actually make any money? Now, the greatest value these systems provide is not data, it's not numbers, it's not even forecasting. It's knowing what's gone wrong and where to fix it. There's a concept I learned from one of my martial arts instructors that said, when something's not working, chances are you did something wrong immediately beforehand, in the step before that. Maybe your feet were in the wrong place, maybe your timing was off. When something is broken in your funnel, take a look at the step immediately above in your operations and try and figure out what happened to make that go wrong. This tells you how to begin repairing things, how to begin to fix those problems. So we have covered an enormous amount of territory in 48 minutes here through the ABCs of marketing and the marketing, I guess, circle of life almost. We've looked at how to analyze your audience to know who they are, build that audience to grow it, and then convert it into valuable business. So with that, let's go and check Twitter to see if people have had any questions about this webinar. Okay. For the many people who have asked whether this video recording will be available, the answer is yes. The handout and the video recording will be available here, so feel free to go ahead and download it there. And so, interesting question. Someone asking on Twitter, how do you measure the value of things that do not necessarily have sale value? And the answer is really complex. So If you're talking about things like building loyalty, or you've got an audience that's already saturated and there's no new audience to build, then you have to use a marketing automation system or a CRM to decide how much additional value you're capturing from that audience. You will still have to publish media. Right? You'll still have to continue to keep people's attention, keep their awareness, keep their trust, but you will not necessarily have audience growth numbers to support that. At that point, you need to look into your marketing automation system and say, okay, is this content continuing to drive additional leads because you've got this audience? So are there more potential valuable customers in that audience? And then are we getting more actual revenue out of those folks? At that point, you are no longer talking about public relations or media. You are now talking about marketing and sales processes, and those are things that you would need to go dig out of your CRM. Let's see, additional questions. What about PR that is not related to sales? There are examples of cases where public relations provides value above and beyond marketing and sales. For example, crisis communications, there is a value on protecting your reputation and your brand, absolutely. The problem is that quantifying brand damage is very, very difficult, except in the far rearview mirror. For example, a lot of the brands that have had brand crises, if you look back, there was a lot of discussion, but their stock price and their revenue did not substantially change. So it's hard to measure to see whether public relations had an impact on that or not. The best way to solve that question about the value of non-marketing public relations, like crisis communications, just general community building, corporate social responsibility, is with surveying. Because that's where you're going to get answers about, what is your perception of the brand? How likely are you to recommend a brand or a blog to a friend, to a colleague? These are things called net promoter scores, and they're surveys you should probably run for your brand. If you have the ability to do so, run them on a quarterly basis. If you start, say, a crisis comms program or a CSR program in Q1, at the end of Q1, your net promoter scores for people who have an intent to buy or who are recommending you to a friend should go up. If those scores don't move, and absent of any public relations missteps or absent of any marketing missteps, then you know that your corporate social responsibility program probably isn't having the measurable impact that you would want. But surveying is the only way to answer that particular question. Let's see, other questions here. I think that'll do it. So again, if you would like to grab the handout for this presentation, it is at this URL here, shiftcom.com/ABC. We're happy to answer that. And of course, if there are any other questions, feel free to email us or visit our website, shiftcom.com. And thank you very much for watching.